Welcome the anointed ones. When wolves unite to devour a lamb, they forget one thing. Sometimes that lamb has already grown into a lion. What if I told you that the very group that conspired against you, the ones who sat in secret circles plotting your fall, just received the worst kind of news imaginable? Not the kind printed on paper, but the kind that spreads like wildfire through whispers, broken alliances, and panicked eyes. Their so-called spiritual attack didn't just fail. It backfired in a way they never saw coming. Here's a fact to put it into perspective. History records that every empire built on deception collapses faster than the truth it tried to silence. The Roman Senate tried to bury Christ's resurrection with lies. The Salem accusers swore their victims were witches, until hysteria consumed the accusers themselves. Enemies always forget that once you launch an attack against the innocent, you're not just fighting them. You're fighting the law of justice itself. And let's be real for a second. Your enemies probably thought they were starring in some kind of Avengers, Dark Edition, teaming up in secret, chanting, scheming, plotting your end. But the punchline? You weren't the victim of their little script. You became the plot twist that ruined the whole movie. So now here's the suspense. The very people who thought they had you cornered are scrambling to understand how you walked out untouched. Their bad news is not just that you survived, it's that you outsmarted them on a level they can't comprehend. They used tricks, but you used truth. They used numbers, but you used discernment. They used hate, but you used destiny. And the irony? They thought they were exposing you, but all they really exposed was themselves. Number 1. They planned against flesh, but you answered in spirit. They planned against your flesh, but you answered in spirit. That's why they're devastated right now. When people plot against you, they almost always underestimate what's truly protecting you. They target what they can see: your reputation, your finances, your relationships, your opportunities. They think if they pull a string here or cut a connection there, you'll crumble like paper. But what they don't understand is that your foundation isn't built on what's visible. You don't stand on the shaky ground of human approval or material success. You stand on something they can't touch, the strength of the spirit. That's the part that frustrates them the most. They did everything in their human power to strike you down. They gossiped about you, hoping your image would be destroyed. They manipulated situations, believing they could block your access to opportunities. They tried to isolate you, expecting loneliness to break you. But every attempt hit the flesh while missing the core of who you are. They played the wrong game from the very beginning. Here's the truth. Spiritual attacks cannot succeed when the person being attacked has tapped into a higher dimension of awareness. While they were fighting with tools of control, fear, and deception, you were navigating with wisdom, intuition, and divine covering. That's why their weapons looked sharp but ended up dull. They expected you to panic, retaliate, or at least stagger. Instead, you moved with calmness that they couldn't interpret. And nothing terrifies an enemy more than realizing their strongest moves didn't even make you flinch. What adds insult to injury is this: every one of their attacks had side effects they didn't anticipate. While they were aiming at your flesh, those very struggles trained your spirit to grow sharper. What they thought would weaken you became training ground. You became more discerning, more prayerful, more disciplined. Their malice acted like a gym for your soul, strengthening muscles you didn't even know you had. And now they sit in shock, because the news has reached them that what they tried so hard to break only fortified you. Their strategy was never spiritual, it was carnal, and you don't defeat someone whose power source is beyond the physical. That's why their circle is restless. They finally realized you weren't just surviving, you were spiritually outmaneuvering them the whole time. Number 2. Their attack was based on your old self, not who you've become. They launched their attacks on an outdated version of you, and that's where they lost before the battle even began. Enemies always operate on old data. They remember who you used to be, unguarded, maybe insecure, maybe too trusting, and they assume you're still that same person. Their strategies were built on the blueprint of your past. They counted on you reacting the way you once did, falling into the same traps you used to fall into, or breaking under the same pressure that once had you on your knees. But the biggest shock to them is this: the version of you they came after no longer exists. That's why they can't understand how their attacks didn't land. They thought the same lies that worked before would work again. They thought the same manipulations that once tripped you up would still throw you off balance. They didn't account for your growth, for the fact that your trials, your pain, and your losses evolved you into someone they've never met before. You aren't playing on the same level anymore, and that's their nightmare. They're trapped fighting a ghost, while the real you has already leveled up beyond their reach. It's like someone trying to unlock a door with a key that no longer fits. They keep turning it, pushing, getting frustrated, but the lock has changed, and the harder they push, the more obvious it becomes that they no longer have access. That's the kind of frustration they're living in now. They can't figure out why their tactics are failing, and instead of realizing you've transformed, they're blaming each other for the collapse of their plans. The truth is, transformation is the greatest defense. You didn't just survive, you became unrecognizable to the strategies of your past. They calculated your weakness, but they never factored in your healing. They bet on your fears, but they didn't count on your courage. They leaned on your silence, but they never imagined your wisdom. And so, while they're stuck playing checkers on yesterday's board, you're already playing chess in a new arena. That's the bad news they've received. Their enemy doesn't even exist anymore. They aimed at who you were, but who you are now is untouchable. And that realization has left them in shock, because nothing feels worse to a hater than realizing they've been wasting their time fighting a shadow. Number 3, the more they tried to bind you, the more you unlocked hidden gifts. Every attempt they made to cage you spiritually ended up unlocking gifts you didn't even know you had. That's the kind of twist they never saw coming. They thought their curses, their lies, their manipulations would suffocate you, but instead, those very pressures triggered hidden strengths buried deep inside you. It's the paradox of being chosen. What was meant to crush you becomes the very thing that elevates you. When people launch spiritual attacks, they expect destruction. They expect confusion, weakness, and despair to overwhelm their target. But in your case, the opposite happened. Their energy forced you to dig deeper into yourself, to draw on reserves of power you might never have tapped into without that kind of resistance. You learned to pray differently. You learned to watch differently. You became sharper, wiser, and harder to access. They thought they were building a prison, but in reality they were pushing you into a training ground that unlocked levels of discernment and resilience they could never compete with. That's what enrages them the most. They believed their efforts would mark the beginning of your decline, but instead, those efforts acted like fire refining gold. The more they tried to limit you, the more you expanded. The more they tried to dim you, the brighter your light revealed itself. And the cruel irony for them is that they became the unwilling architects of your transformation. Without meaning to, they contributed to your awakening. It's one of life's unbreakable laws. Pressure reveals what's hidden. They pressed down on you, thinking you would break, but the pressure only revealed your strength. They tried to bind you with fear, but fear unlocked courage. They tried to drown you in confusion, but confusion unlocked clarity. They tried to bury you under shame, but shame unlocked self-respect. Every chain they forged ended up becoming a key. Now they are left looking at you with disbelief. You weren't just unharmed. You came out with gifts that made you even more untouchable. And the worst part for them is knowing that the very attacks they invested in became the stepping stones that took you higher. They wanted you powerless, but they ended up being the reason you discovered just how powerful you really are. Number 4, they never considered that your survival would be the evidence of their defeat. They never considered that your survival would be the ultimate evidence of their defeat. Every plan they made, every word they whispered, every hand they tried to play against you was designed to make you disappear, to silence your voice, to erase your presence from their world. They counted on you bending, breaking, or running, assuming their attacks would leave marks they could measure. But the harsh truth they're now facing is that none of it worked. You're not just standing, you're thriving. Your survival is a glaring spotlight on their impotence, a reminder that all their schemes were built on weakness disguised as strength. What makes this even more humiliating for them is that their weapons were never real. Their curses, manipulations, and lies looked sharp, but they were hollow. The strategies they used to try to control you were smoke and mirrors, illusions crafted to scare, confuse, and intimidate. They acted as if the damage they inflicted was permanent, as if you were fragile enough to shatter. Yet here you are, untouched in ways they can't explain, walking with calm authority while they fumble in panic, trying to understand how everything they believed would work failed completely. Your presence alone is now a form of retaliation. Every day you breathe, every step you take, every achievement you accomplish is a declaration that their power was never enough. They wanted to break you so badly that even the simplest sign of your existence feels like a personal defeat to them. They didn't account for the fact that some people are built not to fold under pressure, not to succumb to attacks, but to rise stronger because of them. Your resilience isn't just survival. It's proof that their attack had no real foundation, no real force behind it. Now their shock and frustration are compounded by the fact that the very thing they wanted to destroy is the very thing proving their failure. You don't need to respond to them or fight back. The fact that you remain unshaken is already louder than any words or actions. Your life itself has become the undeniable evidence that their efforts were wasted, that their schemes were powerless, and that you, against all odds and against all their intentions, have emerged victorious. Number 5. They thought you'd fight them directly, but you fought on higher ground. They thought you would meet them head-on, trading blow for blow, returning gossip for gossip, hex for hex. That's exactly what they wanted. A visible fight where they could measure your strength and, in their minds, claim some kind of victory. They imagined you would descend to their level, become entangled in the petty chaos they orchestrated, and give them the satisfaction of seeing you struggle. But you didn't follow their script. You didn't respond on the same plane they were operating on. Instead, you fought on higher ground, where their weapons couldn't reach and their strategies couldn't touch you. By refusing to engage with their frequency, you shifted the battlefield entirely. While they exerted energy plotting, spreading lies, and trying to provoke reactions, you moved silently, steadily, and strategically. Every attempt they made to trap you became an exercise in futility. They were swinging at shadows, imagining they could hit something solid while you were untouchable above, untethered by their schemes. They expected confrontation, but all they got was your calm elevation, which left them frustrated, disoriented, and exhausted. The brilliance of fighting on higher ground is that it turns the enemy's aggression against themselves. Their energy, focused on pulling you down, only deepened their own entanglement in negativity, paranoia, and disarray. Meanwhile, you moved forward with clarity, purpose, and an unseen protection that they could neither predict nor counter. Every effort they made to provoke a reaction, to cause chaos, or to claim victory was wasted, because you were operating from a place they couldn't even locate on the map. This is why your survival and your progress feel like an insult to them. They expected the drama of a battle they could see, and instead they are confronted with your quiet ascendancy, a demonstration of power they cannot measure or comprehend. You didn't just avoid their traps, you rendered them irrelevant. You didn't fight on their level, and in doing so, you preserved your energy, protected your spirit, and exposed the emptiness of their attacks. By rising above, you turned what was meant to be a confrontation into a display of your untouchable strength, leaving them confused, frustrated, and powerless. Number 6. Their unity was their weakness, not their strength. Their unity was never real strength. It was their greatest weakness. They believed that by banding together, plotting in numbers, and feeding off each other's bitterness, they could create an unstoppable force against you. What they didn't realize is that alliances built on envy and malice are inherently unstable. Every connection they had was tied not to loyalty or integrity, but to a shared desire to see you fail. That kind of foundation can never hold. It's only a matter of time before the weight of their own negativity causes it to fracture. Envy is contagious, and in their circle it festered. Instead of collaborating with clarity, their thoughts were consumed by comparison, resentment, and one-upmanship. Each person's bitterness fueled the next, creating a chain reaction where suspicion and competition were stronger than any actual strategy. They weren't working together. They were feeding each other's weaknesses, and that made their group far more fragile than they could ever admit. The cracks started small, an argument here, a doubt there. But once they appeared, the entire alliance began to crumble. When people unite under spite instead of purpose, every minor conflict escalates into something much bigger. Decisions become chaotic, loyalties waver, and fear replaces confidence. They couldn't see it at first because their focus was on attacking you, but their own system was imploding from the inside. Their strength in numbers turned into a circus of paranoia and mistrust. Meanwhile, you watched quietly, untouched by their instability. Every attempt they made to coordinate against you backfired because their energy was misaligned. The more they tried to synchronize, the more obvious their flaws became, and the easier it was for you to stay ahead. Their dependence on one another's bitterness created blind spots and miscalculations that left them exposed. In the end, their unity was an illusion, a mirage of strength that vanished as soon as pressure arrived. While they were busy holding together a fragile facade of control, the very foundation of their circle was rotting, and you, standing apart, emerged untangled, free from the collapse that they themselves engineered. Their envy, their dependence, and their instability, all combined to make their greatest asset, their numbers, into the very instrument of their undoing. Number 7. They counted on fear, but you fed on revelation. They counted on fear to control you, believing that terror would weaken your spirit and make you easy to manipulate. Every scheme, every lie, every whisper of intimidation was designed to freeze you in place, to make you doubt yourself, to make you stumble. That's the method of spiritual attacks. Paralyze the target, cloud their judgment, and feed off the chaos that fear creates. But what they didn't anticipate was how your mind and spirit would respond. Instead of trembling, instead of falling into panic, you turned their fear tactics into a lens of clarity. Every attempt to intimidate you became a lesson in discernment. The very forces they used to pressure you revealed their patterns, their methods, and their intentions. You started seeing the repetitive cycles, the predictable moves, and the weaknesses in their attacks. What they expected to confuse you ended up teaching you exactly how to navigate every obstacle. Their fear-based strategies didn't create paralysis. They created insight. Every threat, every manipulation, every shadow of danger became a compass, pointing you toward the next step, guiding you around the traps they thought would ensnare you. That's why they are in disbelief now. They believed fear could silence you, but instead it sharpened you. They aimed to make you hesitate, second-guess yourself, or even surrender your peace. But their tactics only reinforced your vigilance, your awareness, and your spiritual armor. What they thought would make you small, vulnerable, or weak actually expanded your understanding of the battlefield. You didn't just survive the fear, they handed you the map to every hidden corner of their strategy, and you used it to move freely while they remained trapped in their own confusion. The irony is devastating for them. Every intimidation that should have broken you only elevated you. Every whisper of dread became a light exposing their own limitations. They invested energy in creating fear, but fear in your hands became revelation. And now, standing untouchable and aware, you've shown them that their greatest weapon was powerless against a spirit that sees clearly, thinks strategically, and refuses to bend. What they intended as your weakness became your strongest advantage, leaving them frustrated, exposed, and defeated. Number 8. They tried to write your ending, not realizing you're the author. They tried to write your ending as if your life were a story they could control. Every rumor, every false accusation, every attempt to manipulate perception was meant to shape your narrative in their favor. They spread lies, twisted facts, and constructed scenarios designed to make you look small, weak, or defeated. They wanted the world to see a version of you that matched their envy, their bitterness, and their schemes. But what they didn't realize is that you were never a character in their story. You are the author of your own life. Their efforts to control you were doomed from the start because your life isn't dictated by human opinions or temporary malice. Every time they tried to push you into their narrative, you moved in ways that exposed their lies. Every plot they created, every slanderous whisper collided with the reality of who you are. Their attempts to craft an ending for you backfired because truth has a way of speaking louder than falsehood. What they thought would bind you only highlighted the contrast between their deception and your authenticity. The irony is sharp and undeniable. While they worked tirelessly to convince the world, and perhaps themselves, that you were weak or defeated, your actions, presence, and resilience told a completely different story. Their script collapsed under its own weight, looking flimsy and amateurish next to the undeniable proof of your life. Each lie became a page of bad fiction, while your reality continued to write chapters of triumph, clarity, and strength that they could neither erase nor control. What frustrates them most is knowing that no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't dictate your destiny. You were never part of their story, never under their pen. You move freely, guided by principles, vision, and a higher hand that they cannot influence. And every attempt to force a narrative only strengthened your position, showing the world that their voices were empty while yours carried power. Their plots reveal more about their own envy and weakness than about you, and your life, untarnished and flourishing, stands as the undeniable evidence that the ending belongs only to the one who holds the pen, you. Number 9. Their weapon of secrecy failed against your gift of discernment. Their weapon of secrecy was meant to be their greatest advantage, but it failed completely against your gift of discernment. They thought silence, shadows, and hidden agendas would give them control over the situation. Every whispered plan, every clandestine meeting, every attempt to manipulate from behind the scenes was designed to keep you in the dark, vulnerable, and guessing. They assumed that if they operated in secret, they could stay one step ahead while you floundered trying to catch up. But what they didn't understand is that discernment sees what secrecy tries to hide. You didn't just notice their moves, you understood the patterns behind them. Every hidden motive, every concealed intention, every veiled attack became obvious to you because you were tuned to recognize truth even when it was buried beneath layers of deception. Their shadows offered no cover. Their silence was transparent. You could anticipate what they would do before they even acted, and that foresight gave you a control they never expected you to have. That's why they are frustrated beyond measure. They believed secrecy would protect them and give them power over you, but instead, it exposed their weaknesses. Every plan they thought was invisible became visible in your mind, clearly mapped out by the sharpness of your discernment. While they were scrambling to cover tracks, adjust stories, or manipulate perceptions, you moved freely, untouched and aware of every detail. The irony is crushing for them. The very strategy designed to conceal their attacks only highlighted your awareness. They relied on shadows, but you carry a light that penetrates every corner. Their fear of exposure, their obsessive secrecy, and their hidden plotting all became proof of their vulnerability, not your weakness. Their advantage turned into their downfall because they underestimated your ability to see clearly, to read between the lines, and to act before they could even complete a move. In the end, their attempts at secrecy were wasted energy. You were never caught off guard. Their hidden plans didn't intimidate you, they informed you. And now, standing above their confusion and miscalculations, your discernment has left them exposed, bewildered, and powerless against someone who sees far beyond what they think is hidden. Number 10. They confused delay with victory. They confused delay with victory, and that's what made their shock so intense when the truth revealed itself. Every time life seemed to slow down for you, every moment when progress wasn't visible to the naked eye, they assumed they had won. They celebrated in secret, whispered to each other about how you were finally stalled, finally weakened, finally on the verge of collapse. What they didn't realize is that what they mistook for stagnation was actually incubation. Every quiet moment, every pause, every setback you endured was preparing you for a breakthrough far greater than they could have imagined. Their arrogance blinded them to the reality of divine timing. They judged your circumstances as weakness or delay, failing to see that patience, strategy, and spiritual alignment were working on your behalf. While they were busy toasting to what they thought was your downfall, forces far beyond their understanding were positioning you for elevation. Every move they thought had succeeded was secretly contributing to the formation of your ultimate victory. And when that breakthrough arrived, it hit with a force they never anticipated. Their celebrations turned to despair because the very thing they assumed they had delayed now exploded into fruition. All their planning, all their plotting, all their supposed victories dissolved in the face of your rise. What looked like a slow climb to them was a silent accumulation of strength, wisdom, and power that no human observation could measure. The cruelest irony for them is that they never saw it coming. They thought they were ahead, thinking in terms of speed, visibility, and immediate results. But you were operating on a timeline they could not perceive. Every delay they rejoiced over was a miscalculation, a reminder that they never controlled the outcome. Their energy, their attention, and their pride were wasted on what they believed was a moment of triumph, when in reality it was just a pause before your undeniable, unstoppable victory. By the time they realized the truth, the moment had passed, and you were already moving forward far beyond their reach. Their brief sense of triumph became the memory of their failure, and your breakthrough stood as living proof that what looks like delay to the untrained eye is often the precursor to unstoppable success. Number 11. Their energy was invested in your fall while yours was invested in growth. Their energy was invested in your fall while yours was invested in growth, and that's the cruel twist they can't get over. Every sleepless night they spent watching, plotting, and scheming against you was wasted energy. They thought they were gaining an advantage, thinking that if they focused enough on your supposed weaknesses, they could control the outcome of your life. Every whisper, every calculated move, every effort to trip you up was meant to derail your progress. But what they failed to understand is that energy follows intention, and your focus was on expansion, not on retaliation. While they obsessed over your potential collapse, you were quietly building. You invested your time, your mind, and your spirit in growth, praying, learning, creating, and strengthening every part of yourself that mattered. Their attacks and manipulations meant to harm you became the backdrop against which you multiplied in strength, character, and resilience. They fed on negativity, and in doing so, they unknowingly provided you with the fuel to rise higher. Every plan to stunt your growth ended up accelerating it instead. Now the reality that burns for them is this: their obsession with destroying you didn't weaken you, it made you formidable. They underestimated the power of deliberate, consistent self-investment. They measured success in terms of disruption and chaos, thinking that if they could rattle you enough, your trajectory would derail. But the opposite happened. Your quiet, deliberate work created a momentum they couldn't touch. Every hour they spent in envy, fear, or scheming became a testament to their wasted energy, while your nights of focus and discipline compounded into unstoppable forward movement. The greatest irony of all is that the very people who aimed to harm you became the architects of your elevation. Their energy, directed at your downfall, was repurposed by your own resilience into the building blocks of your growth. And now their biggest pain is knowing that they helped shape the very version of you they tried to destroy. Their effort to diminish you only illuminated your strength, and every moment they spent plotting against you is now a reminder of just how far ahead they will never be. Number 12. They thought they could curse what was already blessed. They thought they could curse what was already blessed, and that's where their entire strategy failed. They approached you with malice, believing that their words, their rituals, or their intentions could taint, weaken, or destroy what they perceived as vulnerable. They assumed that power could be imposed from outside, that a well-crafted curse or ill-intentioned scheme could alter your path. What they didn't realize is that you were already rooted in something far greater than their understanding, something sacred, protected, and predestined, Every attempt to harm you bounced back because blessings written before time cannot be erased by temporary malice. Their energy, aimed at bringing you down, collided with your divine protection. Every plan, every hex, every whispered threat was met with an invisible shield they couldn't see and couldn't penetrate. The very act of trying to curse you highlighted their lack of insight. They were attempting to manipulate something far beyond human reach. The irony is sharp and undeniable. While they poured effort into negativity, their actions had no real effect on you. Their curses, which they imagined would create fear or destruction, ricocheted, leaving them frustrated, powerless, and exposed. Their confidence was built on the illusion that harm could be done from without, ignoring the truth that what is truly blessed operates on a different frequency, governed by principles they cannot influence. This miscalculation is their undoing. Every scheme they launched only confirmed the strength of your foundation. They assumed control over your life where none existed. Their attacks became meaningless because they ignored the source of your protection, the part of you that cannot be touched by human envy, manipulation, or spite. They underestimated the force that has always been with you and that oversight cost them any chance of victory. Now they are left in disbelief, unable to understand how every attempt to curse or harm you failed so completely. Their energy, their focus, and their malice, all intended to disrupt your destiny, have instead emphasized the certainty of your path. What they tried to tarnish was untouchable, what they sought to break was unbreakable, and what they aimed to manipulate was already divinely aligned. In trying to curse you, they only revealed the depth and invincibility of your blessings. Number 13. They attacked without realizing they were the ones exposed. They attacked without realizing they were the ones exposed, and that's the irony they will never recover from. The moment they directed their energy at you, they revealed more about themselves than they ever could have imagined. Every lie, every manipulation, every attempt to harm you acted like a spotlight on their own character. People who once trusted them started noticing cracks in their story, small inconsistencies that suddenly made sense, and the mask they wore for the world began to slip. Their malice became transparent. Every act intended to diminish you instead highlighted their envy, their insecurity, and their true intentions. Friends, colleagues, and even casual observers who had previously believed their image began to see the truth. The jealousy they thought they could hide became obvious. The schemes they hoped would remain secret were now evidence of their character. Without intending to, your enemies became the very proof that they were untrustworthy, petty, and consumed by bitterness. What they didn't realize is that attacking the innocent often exposes the attacker far more than it ever impacts the target. Their focus on bringing you down left them blind to how visible their motives had become. Every plot, every whisper, every effort to manipulate circumstances against you became an unintentional confession. They became their own worst testimony, proving to everyone around them what kind of person they truly were. And now, the shock and frustration they feel are compounded because they cannot hide the exposure. Their actions, which they believed were secret weapons, have turned into public mirrors reflecting their weaknesses. While they tried to control perception and manipulate outcomes, they only managed to broadcast their own moral bankruptcy. In attacking you, they provided clarity to others about who they really are. The ultimate blow is knowing that they walked into this exposure thinking they were victorious, only to find themselves revealed. They thought you were the target, but in reality, you became the lens through which their true nature was seen. Every attempt to harm you became a revelation, and their own actions ensured that their reputation and integrity took the hit they intended for you. In attacking, they became the exposed. And that is the kind of irony that leaves them powerless and humiliated. Number 14. Outsmarting them wasn't strategy, it was destiny. Outsmarting them wasn't strategy, it was destiny. Every move they made, every scheme they devised, every attempt to control or harm you was anticipated long before they even thought to act. This was never about you being smarter, faster, or more cunning than they were. Outsmarting them wasn't a matter of skill or timing, it was written into your divine design. Their role in this story was to attack, to test, to provoke, and to challenge. while your role was to endure, to rise, and to transform. The truth is, their attacks were never random. Every scheme, every attempt at manipulation, was woven into the narrative that ultimately ensured your growth and elevation. They thought they were creating obstacles, but what they really did was carve a path for you to evolve. Every moment they believed they were setting traps. They were unknowingly providing opportunities for you to prove your resilience, sharpen your discernment, and strengthen your spirit. Their effort, intended to diminish you, became the mechanism of your advancement. What makes this so devastating for them is that no matter how elaborate their attacks, no matter how coordinated their plans, you were always one step beyond, not because you outplayed them in a human sense, but because your path was guided by something far greater. Their malice, envy, and schemes were all part of a script they couldn't see, a plan that guaranteed your victory before they even started. Every time they thought they had an advantage, destiny had already positioned you where you needed to be, untouchable and prepared for what they could never anticipate. In the end, they were essential to your rise without even realizing it. Their attacks were not just challenges, they were tools, shaping your endurance, focus, and character. By trying to harm you, they contributed to your development, your insight, and your strength. And now, when you emerge from the storm stronger, wiser, and unshakable, it becomes clear that the entire experience was never about them winning or losing. It was always about you fulfilling your purpose, evolving exactly as destiny intended, and proving that no force, no matter how determined, can override what was divinely designed to succeed. Your enemies thought they had the upper hand. They believed that whispers, schemes, and attacks could define your story, manipulate your path, or weaken your spirit. They counted on fear, secrecy, and malice, thinking their energy alone could bend your destiny to their will. Every plan they crafted, every attack they launched, every lie they spread was meant to shatter you. Yet, against all odds and against all their expectations, you didn't just survive. You rose, unshakable and untouchable. Every curse ricocheted, every plot exposed their weaknesses, every attempt to silence you became a catalyst for growth, revelation, and transformation. Where they relied on envy, you built resilience. Where they sought to trap you, you navigated with discernment. Where they aimed to destroy, you evolved. Their attacks were never just obstacles. They were the tools that sharpened your vision, strengthened your spirit, and confirmed the depth of your divine protection. Now their confusion, despair, and disbelief are the echoes of your triumph. Every attempt they made to write your ending failed because you were never theirs to control. You fought on higher ground while they floundered in shadows. Their numbers and schemes crumbled under the weight of their own instability, while your silent focus multiplied your power. What they aimed to diminish became undeniable proof of your strength. What they plotted in darkness became a stage for your light. This is the final truth. Survival was never your victory alone. Your endurance, your insight, and your unwavering presence have turned attacks into testimony, malice into lessons, and obstacles into stepping stones. The higher they aimed, the higher you rose. The deeper they dug, the stronger you became. And now, as they watch in disbelief, it is clear that everything they tried to destroy has instead affirmed your destiny, your purpose, and your unstoppable ascent. You are not just victorious, you are untouchable, unshakable, and unapologetically aligned. Their bad news has become your testimony. Their failure is your elevation. And in every moment it is undeniable. You were always meant to rise above, outsmart, and outlast, and nothing, no scheme, no attack, no envy, can ever change that. If this message spoke to you, don't keep it to yourself. Join the movement. Subscribe to the channel to stay connected to truths that awaken, inspire, and elevate. Hit that like button to show your power, comment to share your breakthrough, and share this with anyone who needs the reminder that surviving, rising, and thriving is inevitable. Your engagement isn't just support. It's a declaration that you refuse to be shaken, silenced, or held back. Be part of a community that celebrates strength, clarity, and unstoppable destiny. God bless you.